If you've ever seen the Christmas movie Elf, or maybe watched the movie Sully about Captain Sully Sullenberger, who landed his plane, his U.S. Air flight in the Hudson River in New York, you're in for a treat. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Todd Komarnicki. Now, Todd has been in the industry for a long time. If you want an inside look at how the entertainment industry works, particularly from the perspective of a producer and a writer, today's episode is going to be exactly what you need. Stay tuned because it's going to be an amazing time. Todd Komarnicki, it's absolutely an honor to have you on here. This is going to be really fun. I've looked forward to this for a long time. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, I was just dragged in here by my entourage. I'm not really sure what this is or who you are, but you look affable enough. And either you've rented a trophy shop to do your filming from, or you've actually won a lot of awards.
Yeah, well, it's you can get them at pawn shops pretty cheap these days. So it does really help the look overall, I think, is the key. Where did you first get the idea that, hey, this writing thing could be for me, or this entertainment thing could be for me? Where did you start getting a glimpse of that?
I can only say that when I look at my life, and to this day, based on the projects that I work on or how things unfold, God just grabs me by the scruff of the neck like a mama dog would pick up a puppy and just move them. And that's been my life, being moved from one thing to another. And it's all been in writing. It's led to producing and some directing. But it's had very little to do with me. It certainly wasn't a lifelong desire. I would say now at 56 years old, I consistently enjoy writing, which is a huge blessing. But for the bulk of my career, I didn't like writing. I liked having written. That was a nice satisfaction.
I love that. Yes.
But I didn't like what I was doing. So it's definitely been a calling more than a dream. But it's made a lot of dreams come true. And I loved movies growing up, but I didn't imagine making movies. Or I think the thing that's been central to my life has been language. So when I was a little boy, I figured out as young as 4 at Narberth Presbyterian Nursery School that a well-timed joke did 2 things. It made you popular with all the other kids, and it got you sent to the hall, which was my favorite place because then I wasn't sitting still, stuck in a classroom. And I used language to my advantage from that point on. So I guess by the time I started dabbling in writing or thinking about writing, I had a facility with language or wordplay and on a shallow level, but I was comfortable with words. I try to take a look at my early scripts to remind myself how bereft of talent I was when I started, because what it was all cleverness and absolutely no story and no heart and no humanity. So I had to beat that out of me. I had to write that smart alecky part of me away. And also realize that if you want to write a great screenplay, great stage play, anything, you can't have your fingerprints on it. You can't be evident. It has to be characters bringing the thing to life, not, oh, that's such a Komarnicki line. So now one of the things that we do at Guy Walks Into a Bar, when Jonathan and Seth, who work with me as the editors essentially beating me up draft after draft, they'll always do a pass where they circle anything that they think is me. Like, that's a Todd joke, funny joke, but this guy would never tell that joke. So you can't have him tell that joke.
That's good. That's interesting. So when you started out though, was Beautiful Boy, was that the play? Was that the first thing that went public, or were you writing for an ad agency? Did you write for other stuff? How did you actually start this whole process?
No, I think when Beautiful Boy went up, I already had a novel published. So that was, I started in the strangest way. I was writing copy for a company that did marketing for Disney movies. So The Fox and the Hound,
right?
And a movie called The Rescue, and then Cocktail, Tom Cruise's Cocktail. That was one of my early campaigns, and I wish I wrote the poster line for that movie. I wrote a bunch of TV spots, but a buddy of mine came up which with the line that I think is still to this day is one of the great poster lines, which is Tom Cruise, and he's making a drink, and it says, "When he pours, he rains."
Woo!
That is so good.
That's art. That's art right there.
That's high art. So I was writing and making a good chunk of change and training myself to be a screenwriter at night, and copywriting pays a lot of money. I was super blessed in my early 20s to be doing that job. And then that company out of the blue got offered to jump up in pay grade and do a Magical World of Disney that used to be on ABC every Sunday. And they were offered, along with 5 other companies, I was told, a chance to produce the next episode. But it was an emergency because they had filmed that episode and it had gone bust, and they needed a new episode, and they needed it in 9 days. So it was the Friday before the second Sunday would air. And I got this call on a Friday night at 8:00 at night, asked to come down to the office right there on La Brea, and was given this task. Do you think you can write a Magical World of Disney variety hour overnight? You have until 8 a.m. We're going to lock you into the office and go. I think all I knew was that sports was the theme. That's it, which was good because I'm a sports nut. So I worked until 8 a.m. The first 2 hours, 8 to 10, was panic and that feeling that you have when you didn't study for the chemistry test. And then the next 2 hours were prayer. And then the last 6 hours were writing feverishly. And they came by, they picked up the script, vanished. And that was Saturday morning. And by Monday morning, we were on set in Burbank shooting what I'd written. And I'd written it and was asked to produce it. I was 23. I looked at the time like the Cowardly Lion. I had long blonde hair and a goatee because that's all I could grow. And this mustard linen jacket that for some reason is the only thing I'm ever wearing in any photograph from that era. So the color palette, I looked like Bert Lahr. It was not a good look. So I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, as you could imagine.
How do you go from there to what would be the first, your real first breakout was probably producing Elf, I guess, right? That's what put you on the map, would you say?
Yeah, but the reason I got into producing is because I'd been selling scripts to the studios and they weren't getting made. And you don't know that. They don't tell you at the beginning, but the rate of attrition for purchased and hired scripts is enormous.
Right.
It used to be they make about 10% of what they developed, and now they make about 1.5%. And they really don't develop anymore. So it's a completely different world we're living in now. But I just, having had a book published and having had plays produced, I found it very frustrating that I could write screenplays that people liked and they weren't coming out into the world. So I got into producing because I wanted to expand my opportunities to get product out. And then Elf came out of that. So yes, what's funny is to the world, suddenly I was, oh wow, this guy's a comedy producer, and let's do that. But what they didn't know is that I had 12 years as a working screenwriter and had sold multiple pilots to the networks, and they knew that I was a writer, but a lot of the world didn't even know I was a writer. So misperception is something that you constantly have to overcome and re-educate people about.
Well, it's also good to point out for writers who happen to be listening to this, why writers become producers, because they do have a little more control over what they actually write. I mean, you do see that more and more. Television, we have showrunners. So we're seeing more and more of that. So, is that a helpful thing? Is that something you'd recommend to a young writer?
Absolutely. On the film side, the reason I wanted to do it is because I love comedies, but I don't feel driven to sit down and write a comedy. I've rewritten studio comedies. I've done joke punch ups. Yep. And I know the machinery of comedy, but what I felt was missing, and the reason that Elf is the movie that it is that I feel like our culture essentially for the last 40 years has been about comedies of humiliation, what I would call kick in the crotch comedies. Yeah. And now reduced to TikTok, and YouTube and cat videos, and anytime seeing a stranger injured is hysterical. That's sort of what the bulk of comedies have been. And even if it's not a physical humiliation, it's an emotional humiliation.
Yeah.
Our sitcom worlds are built on that. Often the husband looking like a complete idiot, Homer Simpson, everybody loves.
Or the dad.
It's always look at what a bumbling idiot this is. And I guess it's the same thing as putting someone down so you feel better about yourself that you do when you're a little kid, some insecurity that they're feeding on in the audience. But I don't find that appealing. I actually find it uncomfortable to watch.
True.
And I wanted to do comedies that were about uplift, which is what we did with Elf. That movie was never about darkness or shame or injury. It was always about light triumphing and goodness triumphing. And the movie's hysterical. You can have a hysterical movie without humiliation. It's not that difficult, but people just don't do it.
So after Elf, what was the next big project you did? I mean, you're always doing stuff, but did Professor and the Madman come along, or did Sully come along? Which one came first? I forget.
Professor and the Madman, I was hired to write in 1998. And then that movie wasn't made for 20 years.
Wow.
Sully, I was hired to write in 2010. And then that movie didn't get made for 5 years. So there's a movie I have right now that just put a director on it and is financed. And I wrote it 22 years ago. Wow. And it's had a long string of A-list directors and stars attached, coming in and coming out, and it's never been made. But it's still around. So I don't know. Listen, A plus B doesn't equal C. It doesn't even equal another letter. Yeah. Not even a letter from the Cyrillic alphabet. It's just, I don't understand. That's my main point about life is I don't understand. But I'm super grateful, and I work my butt off and try to stay open to whatever God is putting in front of me. But yeah, trying to make sense of it beyond give away what you receive. I don't want to do it because I can't.
Well, there's a saying about, when opportunity knocks, it better find you working. And I go back even to the Disney project, that very first one you did, you were writing away. And when the opportunity happened, you were ready to go. And so many, I meet so many people in the entertainment industry today that, well, I want to be a writer. Well, what are you writing? Well, I don't have any project right now because I haven't met a producer or I haven't met a studio. I'm going to be a producer. Great. What are you producing? Well, I'm waiting to make a deal with a studio. They're not actually doing it so that when that moment of opportunity happens, they're ready to rock. And I think your story is so great and encouraging because you got to be in the trenches cranking it out, whether it's your own stuff, whatever it is. I was doing hot tub commercials and all kind of crazy stuff for years. And then the opportunity started to happen. So give me a word, give me a thought about that, because I do think a lot of people listening need to understand that we've got to be doing stuff, whether it's our stuff or somebody else's or whatever, just to be, honing the machine, keeping it moving. Before I answer that, you have to promise me that we can, because this is video, that you can fill in some of these hot tub commercials you made as part of the episode, because absolutely. And Kathleen, my wife Kathleen did some local car commercials, which are just epic. So maybe we should put a podcast together of our past work. That might be something to think about. I can read aloud from my worst scripts. When I wrote my first novel, I sent it to my sister, Kristen, and I was certain that it was genius. I was 25 years old. And her response was, she was living in Toronto, and she said, "Todd, why don't you come up?" I said, "That's okay. You can give me the notes on the phone. It's not going to take long." She goes, "No, why don't you come up?" And she's making her points and I'm batting them away. And finally she says, "Why don't we just read a couple of chapters together? You just read it out loud." Okay. So as I do this, something happens. I find out that within about 7 to 10 pages, I've used the word festival 11 times.
Everything was a festival. It was a spitting festival. It was a cupcake festival. I don't know why, but everything was a festival. I should have called the book Festival.
Yeah.
And by the time I read it the 11th time, I was bent over in hysterics. And her point was well made. And I sent her a 300-page novel, and she sent me back with 53 pages left. And she said, start over. And the only reason that book was ever published is because she told me the truth.
Wow.
And you have to be filthy, gritty, embarrassed, shocked at the poverty of your skill level. The lie of the movie business, I don't find this so much with fiction writers, but the lie of the movie business is that you're one script away from your life changing. And if you just get this one script out the door and it sells, then you can worry about everything else later. But if you don't make that one script good, then there is no later, and you don't get people's attention again. And a very good friend of mine who's an actor and a producer is dabbling in screenwriting now and is really proud of his new script and is dying to send it to me, just dying to send it. And I wrote to him, I said, have you written 35 drafts? And he laughed and he was like, of course not. You know, I did 2 drafts and my brother gave me notes and it's ready to send to you. And I said, when you've written 35 drafts, call me back, because
that's awesome.
I just worked on my 35th draft of the movie that I'm turning into the studio. So you do that, because that's the only way. And I've been doing it for 30 years and I still every single time have to go through that same muck.
That's amazing. That's great. That's a good word. Now, so let's move forward. Talk to me about Clint Eastwood and Tom Hanks, working with those guys. How was the Sully experience?
You get to meet your heroes and they surpass your highest wishes for them. It's deeply humbling and very joyful. One of the great things that happened is that I had the opportunity to hear something a lot of people never get to hear and that I had never heard, even though Clint was a famous figure for my entire life. I got to hear Clint Eastwood laugh. And if you think about it, he doesn't laugh in any of his movies, even in his comedies. It's not something, there's footage of Clint Eastwood laughing. But when he called me after he came on board Sully and we were talking and he wanted to talk about casting, and he said, what do you think about that Tom Hanks? that Tom Hanks. And I said, from Bosom Buddies? And he laughed out loud, long and hard. And that was maybe the highlight of the entire Sully experience was getting Clint Eastwood to laugh.
That's funny.
But then I got to really, I was on set. I got to be witness to how Clint runs a set, which is the only way a set should be run. Quiet as a library, everyone at peace, no shouting, no egos, everybody working smoothly, top of their game, no stress. And then Tom Hanks, who's just a joy bunny and has become a friend, is as fine a person as you're going to meet. And he's also a genius. We forget, because of his facility, we forget that he is Picasso. We forget that he is Beethoven. And he's so gentle and kind and humble that he doesn't afford anyone the time to stop and settle in and see that we need to underline what a genius he is. It'll probably only happen when he passes. But to witness greatness in real time, I give this story. The very first time I ever met him was in the gangway of in LaGuardia that leads up to the plane, and it was before a scene was about to be shot. And Tom and I were talking, and there was just the set dresser who had to be there with him because he was pulling a rolling suitcase, just like Sully had, and myself and Tom, and we're joking around, and then, okay, we're ready, we're set, and then they call action. So Tom is as close to me as this computer screen is to me now. He's maybe 2 feet away, 1.5 feet away. And it's Tom Hanks. And he's dressed like Sully, but it's Tom Hanks. And from inside, the first AD calls action. And Tom, he did move maybe an eighth of an inch, maybe a tiny cock of the shoulder. But I am not lying when I say that Tom Hanks vanished in front of my eyes, and Sully, who I knew really well, appeared. And Sully walked down that gangway and into that plane with his same gait, his shuffle, his fatigue, everything. And then you hear cut, and Tom Hanks walks back up the gangway. Wow. And every time, every scene, the entire movie, he did that same trick.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So did you write a screenplay previously for this based on Sully's book, or did they hire you? Did Clint hire you to write it? How did that get started?
No, I was hired by Frank Marshall and Alan Stewart, the producers. They had a film fund that had bought the rights to the book, and it was an open writing assignment, and I won the job. Thank God. All glory to God. And so I wrote the script, and the craziness of the timing was I finished the second draft and sent it in, and Bob Zemeckis' movie Flight with Denzel came out.
Yes.
And even though that wasn't a true story, it was a movie star movie about a plane crash and an investigation. And so my producers realized, we got to go into hiding. There's no way we're going to get our movie made. So they really went underground for 4.5 years. And when they surfaced, the general feeling was, everybody knows this story. We know it's a happy ending. We don't even need to read the script. And Flight was a hit, and leave well enough alone. But Alan and Frank stayed dogged, and they got it to Clint, and he was one of the two people, he or Spielberg were one of the two people who could resuscitate it. And we went from moribund and forgotten to pre-production overnight.
Well, everybody that sees it, I remember when we went to the premiere, everybody that sees it says they didn't know about how deep that investigation went, all that legal proceedings and things. People didn't know that. And I thought it was really interesting for you to go so deep into that. That separated it from Flight and a lot of other things immediately. But now, where did you get all that stuff? Was that in Sully's book, or was that extra study and research that you did?
Well, the investigation took 15 months. Wow. I had to collapse it into 4 days. But the bulk of all that happened after Sully's book. So I was privy to stuff that the general public didn't know. So I knew there was this story time bomb inside this, the miracle everyone took it to be. But what's amazing is, to this day, I'll find reviews, or people turn me on to listen to a podcast, and people that like the movie will say, but the one shame of it is that they had to invent a villain. They didn't need to do that. They should have just let it be. And they're like, I didn't invent anything.
Yeah.
That is what happened. And they were not happy with the fact that he became famous in the public eye. They were very thrown by a living pilot on the other side of that kind of a mega crash. I don't think they wanted, I don't know. They didn't want Sully to have the spotlight. I'll put it. That's the nicest way I can put it. They wanted time to do their investigation, and they did their job, but it wasn't friendly, and it wasn't. I don't feel like it ever took into consideration all the things that they finally celebrated him for. So you'll find in the NTSB transcripts at the end, they do say all these glowing things about, like, wow, we looked at everything and you're the X factor, and wow. But that was after 15 months of trying to pin it on him.
Wow. It was a great drama. People are on the edge of their seat. It was really, really, really well done. Was Sully happy with the way he was portrayed in your script?
Yeah, it's great. We worked very closely. And if he felt like there was a line that he would never say, I would say, okay, well, how would you say it? And then he would write me, about 10 lines of very technical speak. And I said, well, that's not movie dialogue. So let's split the difference. And then I would come up with a third way. And this wasn't all the time, but a handful of dialogue sections. And then he would be like, okay, I never said that, but I could have said that. And so he was satisfied. And what I really love is that it's such a sacred trust when you're telling a true story, but especially if the person is alive.
Yeah.
And they're gonna live with the imprint of this film. It'll stand out much more than the news. It'll stand out more than their book. That's what people are going to remember. And so I want to get the details and the humanity right. So famously, when Sully saw the movie for the first time, he took his wife, Lori, and he walked out of the cinema on the Warner lot. And all he said to the PR person that was with him was, you got the flying and you got the marriage right. That's all he said. And so it was a little confusion, like, okay, that's good, but did he not like the movie? But that's what mattered to him, because he loves his wife and he's an exquisite pilot. That's what he wanted to get right. So that's the movie he saw. So then a week later he came back, and when he walked out, he goes, oh my goodness, it's a really good movie. Because he was able to see it as a movie the second time.
Yes.
He's cool. Yeah, I love Sully. This is a really great man.
All right, now tell me about your routine. Now you and I just been through this, because I just put this story in my new book, Ideas on a Deadline. But years ago, I remember it made such an impression on me. I'm a big believer in writers, creative people need to have a regular routine. You don't just wait till the muse hits. I've always worked for clients. So whether it's been advertising agency kind of stuff or commercials or documentaries or whatever, we've got a deadline we've got to hit. You're the same way with the movie business. You've got, shooting starts and you've got to be ready. And yet so many people think I'll just wait till the muse hits, the fire from heaven falls, and I have a brilliant idea. And I remember you telling me about living in Manhattan in an apartment. And when the girls were, when the kids were little, you couldn't, you just couldn't write at home. There was just no way you could focus enough to write at home. So you had an interesting little routine of places you went to write. Tell us about that.
That's still the same. Now that COVID's over and the restaurants are open again, I go to Square Diner in the morning. I go to Edwards in the afternoon. I go to Eve for happy hour and late night writing at Walker's. And that is where I write. That's my office. And because I don't have an actual office that would cost me thousands of dollars a month, I'm not using that. I just think of the rent I pay is the sandwich and sip that I have at these local places. So I'm like, I'm supporting them, and I build great friendships with the owners, and everybody wants to know what I'm working on, and they are really invested in what I'm doing. And to me, that's the only kind of fame to have. The only kind of fame I think any of us should have is to be a local. And when you walk in, they know what you're having. They're happy to see you. You know about what's happening in their life. You love them up. You have a great time. And then I get to, do my craft in a comfortable chair.
Well, I think there's something to be said for that, because so many people don't have an office, or they have a small apartment, or they struggle with finding a place to be creative. But the interesting thing to me about this is you show up at these, coffee shops, restaurants, pubs, whatever, every day. I mean, routine is really important to you. I mean, is it a really, I think writers need to understand, if you're going to write, you need to write, and pretty much every day. And I just think that regular routine really does matter. What kind of a difference has that made for you?
To me, the biggest thing is it eliminates the space between writing. I'm a man of prayer. I'm not an anxious person. I'm not a fearful person. And I've been doing one thing for 33 years, 34 years now. But I tell you what, in that empty space between the last page you write and the page you're going to write on the next day, fear loves to come trampling in. You're never going to finish this. You shouldn't have told people you started it. It's not that funny. It's not that dramatic. This was the wrong choice. You're going to dry up. All the negative self-talk that comes in. Now I pray that away. I'm aggressive in attacking it, but it's inevitable. It's not like you reach a point where that doesn't impact your life anymore. But one of the active tools you can use beyond spiritual tools is that if you are writing again, then there's not that empty space for fear to take purchase. You're just writing. So keeping routine, always going back to work, always moving forward and not allowing your mind to wander and to give the accuser any opportunity to hammer you is very freeing. And it also makes you better, because even if the scene that I'm writing or the group of scenes don't ever wind up in the movie, because I've done that work, it's going to unearth something that I hadn't thought of before. And I give this example. I wrote a movie, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and was working with a European production company. And I had a pretty good experience with them, but their notes were becoming increasingly frustrating. And I thought we were closer than they thought we were for the material. And this most recent set of notes came in, and in these notes was, to this day and up to that day and for all days to follow, the worst note given in the history of notes. It was a note that was so bad that essentially took the center of the movie, tore it out, offered no explanation why, and burned the movie down from both ends. It was a nitroglycerin of a note. And for a week, I didn't even respond because I was so furious. Like, what do you even do with this? Because who could possibly come up with a note this lame? And that was me being self-righteous for a week. And then, thankfully, God nudged me and said, look, maybe there's something wrong with the scene. Not what's being suggested, but maybe they're looking at that sore tooth because there's something underneath it. Maybe it's not a cavity yet. Maybe there's a loose piece of popcorn in there. Why don't you just shut up and look? And I did. And I was quickly humbled by the fact that there was some loose gravel under that tooth. And that little section of the movie that I had thought was so pristine actually did not only need work, but need work that was transformative. And when I did it, made the whole movie significantly better. All because of that terrible, terrible note. So I have learned my lesson that you don't have to agree with all the notes, but there are no bad notes, because if there is a note, you must be honest enough to look and see if there's any modicum of truth in it, or if there's a problem in the scene or that section. But mostly, on top of that, if you can't defend what is written against what is noted, then you don't have the answer either.
True.
Sometimes you have to have the courage to say, look, I hear you. I know you're frustrated. You think Susie and Frank should be in the scene in the back of a taxi, and I want them on a train and whatever it is. But if I can't explain why the train is the reason and how it gets us to the station 45 minutes earlier, and therefore this domino, that domino, that domino, if I can't do that, then I haven't done my work either. And they're right. So you got to stay humble, and you got to stay always ready to go back to work, because I will promise you this. There's never been a movie that I've gone back to rewrite ever, no matter how long the gap is, that I'm sad that I got another crack to make it better. Not one.
Wow.
Even if I went grudgingly and like, no, and if there's no way it can get better or this or that, every single time during the process, oh, thank God. Like, thank God, because now it's not perfect. And I know, maybe later I'll fix it even more, but this thing got better only because I was dragged back to the table.
That's great. Well, along that line, one of the things I've always admired about you is you've reached an amazing level in the industry, highly respected. You've done amazing work, and yet you keep your faith out in the forefront of everything. You don't hide it. You don't, you're always, you're always talking about praying about this, or, the Holy Spirit led me to do this or whatever. Has that been a difficult thing to navigate, working in Hollywood and yet being a Christian and not being embarrassed by it, or not keeping it secret, not staying in the closet? How does your life work like that?
I have no idea if it's been difficult. I mean, I imagine it's possible that there's some people that refuse to work with me that I don't know about because of my faith. I don't know, but I certainly don't care. There's nobody on planet Earth that is the gatekeeper of my destiny except for Jesus Christ. And since Jesus is the one who saved me and made me, I'm most interested in what he is most interested in. That's it. I'm going to follow the one who saved my life.
That's powerful. That's powerful stuff. I think there's so many people in this town that are just afraid to come forward or be out there. And the thing is, I do tell people, I do meet people that come to Hollywood, younger people that come to Hollywood, and they have a meeting with a producer and they have a meeting with a studio, and they fly that Christian flag. God told me to come to Hollywood and change the industry. Well, you get laughed off the lot if you're that. I think you should lead with your talent, not with your faith. I mean, the reason people listen to you talk about God is because they respect your work. They respect what you do. But if you were a lame writer and you came out here constantly hammering about Jesus, people would get, I think, they'd get fed up with that. So I do think the way you do it is just amazing because you impress people. First of all, you open doors because of your skill, your talent, and then you're not afraid to talk about God. I think that's the formula.
Well, love, and we're perfectly loved and there is no fear in love. So what's to be afraid of? We're children of the resurrection. We're never going to die. Like, there's a great line at the end of John Garfield's movie. He didn't direct it, but he stars in it, Body and Soul, about a boxer. Great movie. Everybody should go look at it. And it's always stayed with me since I was a kid. My dad turned me on to the movie. And he's supposed to throw this fight at the end, and he doesn't because of his own integrity. And they're threatening him. And he looks at the bad guys right in the eyes. He goes, "What are you going to do? Kill me? Everybody dies."
Great line.
He wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid. So in my case, I just think, what do you do? Kill me? I'm not going to die. I just flip the script. So, and it's not about hammering about Jesus. It's just central to my story. So if somebody asks me, I mean, I love talking about it. It's my favorite thing, talk about Jesus. But the goal is not like, I don't make Christian films. I make films about characters of all walks of life, and tell the truth of your characters. And that reflects the greater truth. So the greater truth to me is that we all are made and loved by God. My experience of Christ is more real to me than anything else in my life. Therefore, that's the story I tell. And I meet everybody where they are.
It's good.
And I hear from them and I love them. I'll never know what it's like to be an 11-year-old boy in Thailand or a 75-year-old atheist woman in Copenhagen. I'll never know. If I meet these people or write about them, I want to love them and listen to them and learn from them and not have an agenda and not try to put a lattice work over or manipulate in any way. Because that's not, the gospel is not about manipulation. The good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, is that we are loved. That's
Fantastic. It. That's great. Wow. Thank you. Well, let me ask, what's in the future? Anything we should be looking out for coming up? Anything you can talk about?
Yeah, we got really good news this past week. A long gestating project about Dietrich Bonhoeffer has been financed, and we can say greenlit. We have a prep date and a start date to start shooting in the fall. Great. And we'll have that movie out next year. It's called God's Spy, and it's a movie that I wrote and am producing. Ralph Winter, our dear friend, is also involved as one of the producers, and it's been a profoundly humbling experience to walk alongside the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who put his actual life on the line. Forget about reputation or job security or whatever you think. I mean,
so important.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer traded everything, all his money, his family name, his future, his love, his everything to serve Jesus and take down Hitler. One brave cat.
No kidding. Wow. All right. Well, look for that. And in the meantime, thank you so much, man. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate it. I just have so much respect for what you do, and you're a little bit crazy, but I've learned to live with that. And I think that's fantastic. So thank you. So tell Jane, thanks for letting us have this hour, and appreciate you doing this. Todd is an amazing person. I'm so grateful for his friendship over these years, and he's so talented, and he's doing some remarkable things. And it's just an encouraging word out there that there are incredibly nice people who are talented, who are motivated, who are having an impact on the industry just up there at the highest levels you can possibly imagine. So I'm really excited about what Todd's doing, and I'm grateful for him being on the program today. And remember, share this with people. If you know people that could be encouraged, need a shot in the arm, maybe want to see an example of somebody doing remarkable work at this point in their career, this is the episode for them. And I'd encourage you to share it with people. And remember, rate us. The more you can share it, the more you rate us. Give us some comments. Give me your thoughts and ideas on these episodes. Really makes a big difference for how we come up in the search results and more people get to see these interviews. And by the way, if you haven't gotten my book, Maximize Your Influence, I'd encourage you to do it. How to make digital media work for your church, your ministry, or you. This is particularly designed for churches, ministries, nonprofit, any organizations that are engaging in media, frustrated by your website, frustrated by your social media. You don't understand why your live stream is not connecting with more people. Let me tell you, all the keys are in this book. And if you have a pastor, if you know a church or a ministry that's struggling in these areas, buy it for them. Get them a gift. How nice would that be if you supported a local church pastor or ministry leader or nonprofit leader by getting them something like this that would be ultimately the reference book they need to know how to take their media presence, their media message, their media impact to a whole nother level. So again, thanks for watching. We're so grateful. And check us out on my blog at philcooke.com. Remember, it's Cooke with an E. Check us out at Phil Cooke. Our company site is Cooke Media Group. I'd love to see you there. And remember, if you'd love to donate to the Influence Lab, our nonprofit that helps raise money to fund this teaching and training internationally. I'll tell you, at any given moment, I've said this before, at any given moment, we have 10 or 12 requests from organizations, churches, ministry organizations, nonprofits around the world asking us to come and bring professionals from here in the industry to help teach and train them on video production, social media, writing, acting, so many things like that, so they can use the media to share the gospel in so many different ways. So I tell you what, thanks so much for being a part of it. Thanks for supporting what we're doing. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.